Master Sergeant Cole Raymond looked at the medic's bag, then at the woman holding it, and laughed before he even said a word. He took the bag from her hands, turned it over, and let it drop into the half-frozen gravel of the airstrip. On purpose. "Look at this," he said, loud enough that every man near the loading ramp turned to listen. "Headquarters sent us a nurse and forgot to ask if we needed one." A few of the soldiers chuckled. The woman didn't. She bent down, picked up the bag, opened the top flap, checked that nothing inside had cracked, zipped it again, and walked past him without a single word. And that silence, that calm, unbothered, almost unsettling silence, was the first warning none of those men understood yet. Because the woman they had just insulted was about to become the only reason half of them lived to see the next week. Before we go any further, if stories about quiet courage move you, if you believe that the people who say the least are often the ones who matter most, please subscribe to this channel, follow this story all the way to the end, and drop a comment below telling me which city you're watching from. I genuinely want to see how far this story travels. The first thing Captain Lena Vance noticed when she stepped off the transport was not the cold, though the cold was waiting for her like an old argument. It was the smell. Diesel, scorched metal, wet stone, and underneath it all the faint copper note of a place where people had bled and would bleed again. She had grown up far from anything like this, in a small town in northern Montana where her mother ran a 2-room clinic and taught her to stitch a wound before she could ride a bike. Her mother used to say that medicine was not about being brave. It was about being steady when everyone else fell apart. Lena had carried that sentence into every deployment of her career. This was a forward outpost on the eastern edge of a long, narrow river valley, surrounded by ridgelines that rose like the walls of a trap. Concrete barriers, sandbags, antenna masts, and prefabricated shelters sat clustered together, as if they had been thrown down and abandoned. The wind came off the high ground in slow, deliberate pushes, carrying grit and the threat of snow. Lena had learned long ago that the first 60 seconds in a new place told you everything about the people you'd be working with. So she watched. 8 soldiers near the supply tent, technically stacking crates, actually watching her. She noted the way they stood, shoulders squared, chins lifted, the posture men use when they want to look relaxed but aren't. She noted the glances they traded, and she noted the man in the center of them. Master Sergeant Cole Raymond was 36, thick through the shoulders, with a face that had probably been pleasant once and had since hardened into something permanently unimpressed. He wore his experience the way some men wear an expensive watch, making sure everyone nearby noticed it. He had decided long ago that the years he'd survived gave him the right to measure everyone who'd survived fewer. He'd already insulted her once. He would do it again. Men like Raymond didn't stop at one. He walked toward her now, not to help. Anyone who had spent more than 5 minutes around him understood the difference between when Raymond moved toward something to assist it and when he moved toward it to perform. He stopped 3 feet away and read her name patch like it was the punchline of a joke he'd only just understood. "Captain Vance," he said. "Medical officer." He looked her over the way a man inspects a vehicle he's already decided not to buy. "They keep sending us specialists. What I keep asking for is people who can fight." The soldiers behind him grinned. Lena said nothing. She had learned over 12 years that silence in moments like this was not weakness. Silence was information. When you stayed quiet and let a man talk, you learned the exact shape of the emptiness he was trying to fill with someone else's humiliation. And Cole Raymond, she could already tell, had a very large emptiness indeed. "I need to find Major Hollis," she said evenly. "Point me toward the command shelter." Raymond studied her, trying to decide whether her calm was real or rehearsed. He hadn't met much of the real kind. "Far end," he said finally, nodding toward a low building. "Long walk for someone carrying all that." Another glance at her bag. "I'll manage," she said and walked away. Behind her she heard him say something. She didn't catch the words. She caught the laughter that followed, and one phrase that cut clearly through the thin mountain air. "The Band-Aid lady," she kept walking. Inside the command shelter, Major Daniel Hollis was bent over a map table, marking positions with a worn grease pencil. He looked up with the expression of a man who had been doing this job long enough to be permanently, professionally tired. Mid-40s, gray creeping in at the temples, eyes that had clearly seen enough to make them careful. He straightened and offered his hand, the automatic reflex of a man raised to stand when someone entered a room. Captain Vance. Heard good things. He said it plainly, without the buried sarcasm men sometimes used to mean the opposite. How was the ride? Cold, she said. He almost smiled. Gets colder. Sit. She sat. He walked her through the tactical picture in the language she'd grown up half fluent in: supply routes, casualty timelines, the medical gaps, the broken evacuation chain. She listened and asked 3 questions. She watched each one surprise him slightly. Not because they were dramatic, but because they were precise, the kind of questions that revealed she understood not just medicine, but the terrain that decided whether medicine even reached the wounded. Something shifted in his eyes. Not much, but something. I'll have Corporal Reyes show you the layout, he said, and he'll tell you who to watch. It was not a suggestion. Reyes has been here 10 months. He knows things that don't make it into reports. Lena nodded. She already suspected she'd need to know exactly that. Corporal Marcus Reyes was 23 and looked younger, the kind of young that made senior soldiers sigh. Not because they disliked him, but because looking at him reminded them how much they'd aged. Dark eyes, a quick nervous energy, and the lean build of someone the service had reshaped from a boy into something harder. He was waiting outside when Lena emerged. Captain Vance, he said. I know, she said. Major told me. He fell into step beside her, slightly to her left. She noticed it immediately. He pointed out the essentials: the aid station, the generator that drowned the radios at certain hours, the blind spot along the southern wall where the sentry rotation left a 30-second gap. She filed every detail away. Can I ask you something? He said after a while. You're going to anyway, she said. He laughed, a quick startled sound. Fair. He hesitated. The guys are going to be rough on you. Not all of them, but some. Raymond especially. I noticed. He stopped, restarted. I want you to know not everyone here is like that. Lena glanced at him. His jaw was tight, his eyes forward, the look of someone weighing whether something was his place to say. I know, she said. Hollis isn't. And neither are you. We just met. How can you tell? Because you're walking on my left. He blinked. What? When you walk on someone's left, you position yourself to absorb whatever comes from the dominant threat side. It's a protective instinct. You did it without thinking, which means you actually mean it. People who only want to look protective do it consciously, and they always pick the wrong side. Reyes stared at her for 3 full seconds. That is either the most reassuring thing anyone said to me, he said, or the most unsettling. Probably both, she said. That first night, Lena didn't sleep. Not from anxiety, not from the cold, not from the unfamiliar rhythm of a base settling into its nighttime quiet. She'd slept in worse places, places where sleep meant trusting that the people around you were doing their jobs. She didn't sleep because she had work to do. She pulled out a battered notebook, water-stained and creased from 4 deployments, and began writing. Supply numbers that didn't add up. The condition of the aid station, which had been neglected in ways that suggested either incompetence or indifference. The faces she'd cataloged since arriving. And one detail that kept circling back to her. The evacuation logs showed 3 medical transports in the last 6 weeks that had been delayed, rerouted, or canceled. Each delay had cost a life. Each had been signed off as weather. None of those days had bad weather. At 2 in the morning, she heard boots in the gravel. They stopped outside her door. You're awake, said Reyes's voice. Not a question. I saw your light. I don't need company. I know. A pause. Can I ask one more thing? She set down her pen. 1. Why here? Someone with your record could have gone anywhere. A hospital posting. A training role. Somewhere safe. Lena looked at the wall. She thought about her mother's clinic. About a photograph she carried in her jacket. Her older brother in uniform, grinning, alive. About a sealed report she'd read 2 years ago that had quietly rearranged the entire direction of her life. Go get some sleep, Reyes, she said. A long pause. Yes, ma'am. His boots faded away. She picked up her pen and kept writing. The next morning, Raymond escalated. It started at breakfast, the way these things always start. Casually, with plausible deniability, in a setting where witnesses could tell themselves they hadn't really seen what they saw. Lena sat at the far end of the table, eating methodically, going over the previous night's notes in her head. Raymond settled in 3 seats down with 2 of his people, a corporal named Diaz and a sergeant named Bell, both carrying his energy the way certain dogs carry the temperament of the man who raised them. "So I looked you up," Raymond said. He aimed it at the air, not at her, the technique of a man who'd learned how to push without leaving fingerprints. "Last posting, forward surgical team, took heavy contact." He let it breathe. "Word is you were the only one who walked out." The table went quieter. Lena kept eating. 3 medics, Raymond said. "Gone. And here you are." Bell shifted. Even Diaz, who usually tracked Raymond's tone like a needle tracks magnetic north, looked uncomfortable. "Lucky," Raymond said. Lena set down her fork. She turned and looked at him directly. Not with anger, not with hurt, but with the steady, calibrated attention of someone studying a problem they had already solved and were merely confirming. "Master Sergeant," she said quietly, "I know what you're doing. I know why. And I want you to understand one thing." She held his gaze. "I have carried better people than you off a battlefield. I will not let you make them small." The table was completely silent. Raymond opened his mouth, closed it. Something moved behind his eyes. A recalculation, the particular surprise of a man who pokes a thing and discovers it has teeth he didn't expect. He said nothing. Lena picked up her fork and resumed eating. Later, when the room had emptied and Reyes carried his tray to the return window, he paused beside her chair. "Those 3, he said quietly. "Were they your friends?" She didn't look up. "They were my team." "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry," she said. "Remember them. There's a difference." The test came that afternoon. Hollis had arranged for Lena to run a full inventory and assessment of the aid station. Standard procedure, ostensibly. But Lena understood what he was actually doing. He was giving her a stage. And he was giving the men a chance to watch her either rise or crack under the weight of a system that had clearly been left to rot. Most of the unit found reasons to be nearby. In Lena's experience, soldiers did not gather to watch a medical inventory unless they expected something to go wrong. They expected her to fail. What she found inside the aid station made her stomach tighten. Expired supplies stacked behind current ones. Blood products logged but missing. Surgical kits opened, used, and never replaced. Morphine counts that didn't match the records by a margin too clean to be carelessness. This wasn't neglect. Neglect was random. This was selective. Someone had been quietly hollowing out the unit's ability to save its own wounded, and doing it carefully enough that each individual gap could be explained away. She didn't say any of that out loud. She set up her workspace without hurry, the way her mother had taught her. Calm hands, clear order, one task at a time. She cataloged everything. She rebuilt the kits from what salvage she had. She color-coded the trauma stations and redrew the casualty flow plan on the back wall in marker, mapping it to the actual layout of the base instead of the fantasy version in the official files. By the time she finished, the watching soldiers had gone quiet in a way she recognized. It was the quiet of people who had come expecting a joke and found themselves unable to laugh. Then the moment came that no one had planned for. A shout from the motor pool. A soldier had slipped fueling a generator, and a length of metal had torn open his thigh. They carried him in fast, panicking, blood sheeting down onto the floor. The wound was bad, femoral region, the kind that empties a man in minutes. The same soldiers who doubted her froze. Lena did not. She moved before anyone finished shouting. Pressure first, hard and exact. Tourniquet placed and timed out loud. Airway, breathing, the steady recitation of a checklist she'd run 1,000 times. Her voice low and even, pulling the panic out of the room simply by refusing to carry any. She talked to the wounded man the entire time, using his name, telling him he was going to be fine because she had decided he was. She clamped, she packed, she stabilized. 11 minutes later, the bleeding stopped. The man lived, and the room that had come to watch her fail watched instead as she pulled a soldier back from the edge with nothing but training, steadiness, and hands that did not shake. There was no applause. There was something better, silence, then a slow exhale from a dozen people at once. The sound of men who had spent their careers believing they had seen everything and discovered they were wrong. Raymond did not stay to see it. He had left somewhere in the middle. He always seemed to leave just before he'd have to acknowledge something. That evening Reyes found her on the southern wall, watching the ridgelines fade into the dark. "You could have made that easier on yourself," he said, coming to stand beside her. "How?" "Earlier, with Raymond. Ignored him. Let your work talk." "That's what I did," she said. "You said something to him. I told him the truth. That's not the same as defending myself." She paused. "There's a difference between protecting yourself and justifying yourself. I won't justify myself to Cole Raymond. I don't have the time, and he doesn't have the capacity to understand the answer." The wind pushed thin sheets of grit across the wall. "What happened to your team?" he asked quietly. "If you can say." She was silent a long time. "We were working off bad intelligence," she said finally. "Not accidentally bad. Deliberately bad. Someone who knew our position handed it to the wrong people. My 3 medics paid for that with their lives." Reyes absorbed this. "And you?" "I paid differently," she said. "I'm still paying." She turned to look at the high ground, dark against the last gray light. "Get some rest, Reyes. Something tells me we won't have much of it soon." "Why? You know something?" She was quiet a moment. "I know terrain," she said. "And these ridges have been too quiet for too long. That's never good." She walked back toward the base. Reyes stood there a while longer, trying to see what she had seen. He couldn't. Not yet. But he was beginning to understand that Captain Lena Vance never said anything without a reason, and that whatever was waiting in those mountains, she had already begun to feel it. The only question was whether the men around her would trust her in time. 3 days passed, and the base changed in the quiet way bases do when something shifts in the unspoken agreement between people who live in close quarters. The nickname Band-Aid Lady vanished from the common areas. Not because anyone ordered it gone, but because the men who'd used it most freely now went quietest when she entered a room. There's a particular silence that replaces mockery once mockery has been made to look foolish, and the unit wore it like a shirt that no longer fit, aware of it, unable to ignore it, not yet willing to change. Raymond was the loudest silence of all. He hadn't spoken directly to her since breakfast. He moved around her the way water moves around a stone, never acknowledging the obstacle, simply redirecting, constantly. She noted it without sentiment. A man like Raymond didn't change. He recalculated. And a recalculating man was more dangerous than an angry one, because calculation had patience, and patience waited for opportunity. Reyes brought her the next piece on the 4th morning, over coffee at the far end of the mess where the generator drowned quiet conversation. Raymond requested a transfer, he said, casual, the way young men deliver important things when they're trying not to look like they're gossiping. "When?" "Yesterday." Hollis denied it. She processed that. "Why deny it?" "Because we're 3 days out from a major resupply convoy, and Raymond's the senior vehicle commander. Hollis can't pull him." "Does he want to?" Reyes looked at her. "I think Hollis would put Raymond on a transport home and sleep just fine. But the mission doesn't care what Hollis wants. It cares what we have." "Tell me about the convoy," she said. "It's a medical and supply run," Reyes said, dropping his voice. "Blood, antibiotics, surgical gear, for a village clinic 40 kilometers down the valley. The road closes in 3 days when the storm front moves through. After that, it's impassable for weeks. The clinic's been without resupply for months. 300 people, mostly elders and kids." Lena was quiet. "And the threat assessment?" Reyes hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. She caught it. "What? Officially? Moderate. Possible activity in the northern ridge sector. Manageable with overwatch. And unofficially?" He met her eyes. "Bell ran Recon through the lower valley 2 weeks ago. Came back and told Raymond something. Raymond went straight to Hollis. After that, the risk rating stayed moderate, and Bell looked like he'd been told to forget something. Lena felt the pattern resolving out of the noise. What did Bell say? That the valley felt wrong. Too quiet. No shepherds. No movement. Nothing. He said the last time he saw a valley that empty was 3 weeks before an ambush that cost a whole patrol. Lena thought about the missing blood products, the hollowed-out aid station, the 3 weather delays that had each killed a man, the convoy carrying exactly the supplies that someone, for weeks, had been quietly removing from this base. A picture was forming, and she did not like its shape. "I need to talk to Hollis," she said. She found him outside the command shelter at mid-morning. She told him what she'd seen herself, the systematic gaps in the medical inventory, the falsified evacuation logs, the pattern of delays that no weather could explain. She kept Reyes's second-hand intelligence to herself. She had no way to verify it without burning him as a source. She told him plainly, precisely, the way she'd been trained to report. When she finished, Hollis was quiet for a long moment, staring at a blank spot on the wall. "You're telling me someone's sabotaging our medical readiness," he said. "I'm telling you the numbers don't lie," she said. "And the timing isn't an accident. Whoever's doing this knew this convoy was coming. They've been preparing for it." Hollis rubbed the back of his neck. "You could be wrong. I could be," she said. "I'm not." He looked at her for a long moment. "Don't share this with anyone yet," he said finally. "If it reaches Raymond," he stopped himself. "It'll what?" she asked quietly. Hollis met her eyes. "It'll reach the wrong people," he said. And the flat, careful way he said it told her this was more than a management worry. She filed that away too. That night she opened her notebook and wrote, "Hollis knows something about Raymond he isn't saying. Raymond knows something about the valley he isn't reporting. Bell reported accurately and was silenced. The medical sabotage and the convoy are connected. Check the source of the supply requisitions." She stared at the words. Then she wrote one more line. "Eli, I think I finally found it." She closed the notebook. Outside, the wind picked up from the north, and the temperature dropped 4 degrees in 40 minutes. Somewhere above the base, in the gray nothing above the tree line, the mountains kept their silence, and Lena kept hers. The convoy departed at first light 2 days later. Lena had argued her way into a position no medical officer was supposed to hold, forward of the main column in the lead support vehicle, where she could see the road and the high ground at the same time. Hollis had agreed against regulation because he had stopped pretending this was a routine run. Raymond commanded the rear vehicles. Reyes rode with Lena. As the column rolled into the long throat of the valley, she watched the ridgelines the way her mother had once watched a patient's face, looking for the small wrong thing before it became the big one. She saw it 20 minutes in. Snow displacement along the northern face, in 3 places that matched exactly the elevated firing positions she traced on the map the night before. The drifts were wrong. Not the natural pattern of wind and weather, but the subtle disturbance of bodies that had been there long enough to leave warmth. People. Waiting. Before the convoy ever entered the valley. She keyed her radio, voice flat and exact. "All elements, this is Vance. Possible prepared positions, North Ridge, 3 locations. Recommend immediate halt and cover." A pause. Then Raymond's voice, dripping condescension. "Negative. Keep moving. Medical officers don't call tactical halts." And in that single transmission, Lena understood everything. Because a man who refused to stop a convoy in the face of a clear warning was not careless. He was committed. The first explosion hit the lead vehicle 30 seconds later. The world became fire and noise and the screech of metal. Lena was thrown against the door, ears ringing, the taste of blood in her mouth. When the smoke cleared enough to see, the column was pinned. Fire pouring down from both ridgelines in coordinated, overlapping bursts. This was not a moderate-risk skirmish. This was an ambush built with patience and precision, by people who had known exactly when and where to wait. And then Lena did the only thing she had ever truly known how to do. She went to work, not with a rifle, that was never her weapon. With her hands, her voice, her steadiness. She pulled the wounded from the burning lead vehicle, dragging men through gravel under fire, refusing to flinch as rounds cracked past her. She set up a casualty collection point behind the cover of the second truck and ran it like a surgeon runs a table, calm, ordered, relentless. Tourniquets, pressure, airways, names spoken out loud to men who were certain they were dying, telling each of them they were going to live because she had decided it. Reyes stayed beside her the entire time, feeding her supplies, returning fire when he could, doing exactly what she told him and nothing she didn't. Hollis fought from the front, his voice cutting through the chaos on the radio, holding the unit together by refusing to break himself. And the supplies, the very blood products and trauma kits that someone had spent weeks stripping from the base, were the only reason Lena had anything at all to work with. She understood now. The sabotage hadn't been about theft. It had been about ensuring that when this ambush came, the unit would have nothing left to save itself with. Whoever had planned this hadn't just set a trap in the valley. They had set one back at the base, weeks ago, in the quiet, in the dark, where no one was watching. She worked through it all. One man with a collapsed lung. She decompressed it with a needle and a steady hand while rounds chewed the dirt beside her. A young soldier whose arm was nearly gone. She clamped, packed, and tied him off, then squeezed his good hand and told him he'd throw a baseball again someday, because in that moment the lie was the kindest medicine she had. Where the official plan had failed, where the system had been hollowed out from the inside, she filled the gap with everything she was. Not one man under her hands died in that valley. Not one. When the support aircraft finally arrived and broke the ambush from above, when the fire fell silent and the survivors began to count themselves, Lena was kneeling in blood-stained gravel, still working, still talking, still steady. The same soldiers who had laughed at her 3 days ago now looked at her the way men look at the one thing that stood between them and the dark. And she noticed, even in the chaos, that Raymond was no longer at the rear of the column. He had moved. He had positioned himself, during the fight, away from the wounded, near the northern edge, and he was holding a radio that was not tuned to any of their channels. She watched him for exactly 2 seconds. Then she went back to her wounded, because they came first. They always came first. But she would not forget what she had seen. The aftermath came in the slow, procedural hours that no one ever makes movies about. The wounded were evacuated. The dead, there were none under Lena's hands, though 2 had been killed in the first blast before she could reach them, were carried with the quiet care soldiers reserved for their own. And Cole Raymond was taken into custody at the base that evening, when the logs Lena had documented, the falsified evacuation records, and the unauthorized radio traffic Reyes had quietly recorded were laid out together in front of 2 investigators who had flown in during the extraction. Hollis told her the rest in the hallway outside the debrief room, near midnight, both of them holding coffee gone cold. "I've known something was wrong for 6 weeks, he admitted, and his voice carried the weight of a man finally setting down something he'd been carrying alone. "I was building a case. I needed it to hold. The sabotage, the delays, the convoy, Raymond was the inside hand, but he wasn't the top of it. He was reporting to a network that's been running compromised operations through this corridor for years." He paused. "Including the one that killed your team. Including the one that killed your brother." Lena said nothing for a long moment. She had suspected it since she read the sealed file 2 years ago. She had requested this posting because the trail had led here, patiently, quietly, the way she did everything. She had not come for revenge. She had come for the truth. And tonight, in a blood-stained valley and a hollowed-out aid station, the truth had finally surfaced. "The recordings Reyes captured," Hollis said, "and the documentation you built, it'll trace the network all the way up. There are other families, other names. 7 service members over 11 years, killed in operations that were sold out from the inside. Your brother was one of them. He won't be the last we get justice for. He'll be one of the first." Lena absorbed that. Her grief had always felt personal. Her loss, her brother, her quiet, burning need to answer for it. Now she understood it had always been larger than her. That what she'd carried for 2 years was also someone else's loss, and someone else's, and someone else's. And that the work she had done, the steady, unglamorous, unwatched work, would serve all of them. She went to her quarters and sat on her bunk without taking off her jacket. She drew out the photograph from her inside pocket. Her brother Eli, grinning, alive, in a uniform he'd been so proud of. She looked at it a long time. He had been the one who taught her that being brave wasn't about being unafraid. It was about being steady when everything around you came apart. She had carried that into every wound she'd ever closed, every panicked room she'd ever calmed, every impossible moment where someone's life had narrowed down to whether her hands would shake. They never had. They didn't now. There was a knock. "Come in, Reyes." He stood in the doorway, arm freshly bandaged from a graze he'd never mentioned. He looked at the photograph and didn't ask. "Bell came to find me," he said quietly. "And Diaz. They wanted me to tell you they were sorry. For not pushing harder. For following someone who seemed certain." Lena thought about that. "Tell them what they owe isn't to me," she said. "It's to the men who almost didn't make it out of that valley. Go visit them. Do something useful. That's how you pay a thing like this, not with apologies. With action." Reyes nodded slowly. "That's your brother talking," he said softly. She looked at him, the one who'd seen her clearly from the first day. "Yes," she said. "It is." She walked out to the southern wall at first light. The storm had passed in the night and left the air sharp and clean. The kind of clarity that comes only after everything held suspended in the sky has finally fallen and what remains is pure. The mountains stood against a sky going from gray to pale gold. Enormous, unchanged, indifferent to everything that had happened below them. Hollis came to stand beside her. "When this is over," he said, "I want to recommend you for a commendation. For the valley. For what you brought back." She was quiet. "Sir, the wounded I treated, that was my job. The investigation, my brother, that was personal. I don't want a medal for something personal." "Then what do you want?" She looked at the high ground. "I want the case to hold," she said. "I want the network to come down. I want the other families to get what I got. If you want to do something for me, make sure it holds." Hollis was quiet a long moment. "It'll hold," he said. She believed him. 3 months later, the network was dismantled across 2 countries. 11 people were indicted. The cases of 7 service members killed over 11 years, including Eli Vance, were reopened and reclassified from combat loss to murder by betrayal, every name restored to honor. Raymond pleaded guilty. There was nothing left to argue. Lena accepted a quiet reprimand for the unauthorized recordings and was promoted in the same breath by a board wise enough to understand the two were not in contradiction. She requested a training role and got it. In her first class of young medics, male and female alike, she told them what her brother had told her, long ago, in a small town under an enormous sky. She told them the battlefield did not care about your reputation, your rank, or whether the people around you believed in you. It cared about one thing only, whether, in the moment everything depended on it, you had done the quiet work to be ready. Being ready, she told them, wasn't something that happened on the day. It was everything you did when no one was watching. Be worthy of the moment, she said, before the moment arrives. Then she told them to pick up their gear because somewhere someone was already bleeding, and the people who said the least were so often the ones who mattered most.